Welcome, Pitt fans, to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I am your host, JJ Kitchen. Today, we got a good one. Obviously, from this past Saturday, we were lucky. We got to see a little bit of football. Nothing that's going to be extreme or get people too excited because it was a spring game at Acrisure Stadium for the Pittsburgh Panthers. And I think that how you look at this game rationally is that it's just a fun game to just show a little bit of football in the middle of April to all the fans. And from what I saw yesterday, there's goods and bads, okay? I want people to understand that the spring game, each team is not at 100%, okay? You had people sitting out, obviously, in this game. Gavin Bartholomew obviously was out. Kanate Mumfield was out. Day Reynolds was out. You had a number of different guys. Tyler Bentley, so the team wasn't even 100% on the field. What it is just really just to give the fans something to look at, the potential of the future team. Okay. And one of the things I saw on Twitter and people have been sending to me is, the offense wasn't exciting. There was really nothing that really you looked at the offense. The run game looked really good, but the passing game, really nothing was there, especially downfield. Dracovic threw down the field a little bit. Christian Valar threw down the field a little bit. But when you look at it, though, it's just to show the fans what the team is out there. I think we've all learned under Pat Narduzzi at this point is that the spring game is going to be vanilla. It's just to put people out there. They're still working on things. When fall camp comes around, that's when you start to get really serious in terms of preparing for the first opponent. Obviously, for Pitt, that's going to be against Wofford and head coach Sean Watson. Obviously, Sean Watson, the former offensive coordinator for obviously here at Pitt in his short tenure here. And the way I look at it is this. There were numerous things that I saw, okay? Number one, people who thought the defensive line was going to take a step back this year with all the guys heading to the National Football League and the draft. Guess again. The amount of work that was in there, even with guys missing. Elliot Donald really showed his presence, especially in the middle. And it was kind of cool how about, Charlie Partridge talking about how they cross-trained Elliot Donald to really work on the inside, but also work on the outside of defensive end, just to put him in the game at some point because of just how much depth Pitt has at this point. I think he really, really showed his presence. Dayon Hayes, able to get out there. He was always having some fun. I thought Samuel Okinola, that is a guy, honestly, and you keep hearing it over and over again, that guy is a future All-American. I can tell you this, from seeing it yesterday, you saw how fast he was, how aggressive he was, how violent his hands were. That just goes to show you exactly what Charlie Partridge is doing with those young guys. You saw Jimmy Scott out there. He made a number of good plays. I look at this defensive line, Bam Brema. You've seen how great he has gotten. Nakai Johnson. Obviously, Nakai Johnson and Carter Johnson, the Johnson & Johnson brothers, are the two players that were the most improved this spring, which is really good to see, especially when the tight end room, where it's as extremely thin as it is, it's going to be good to have Bartholomew and Carter Johnson there. But the defensive line overall, you look at the depth that's currently there, that is by far, if anything, Pitt's best position just because that's a Charlie Partridge position group. It has showed again how good that group is going to be just because of the depth, the hard work that they've put in, but also, too, talking about what really goes into being a tremendous defensive end or a defensive tackle. So I look at the D-line room. I see no problems with it. Devin Danielson was another guy that really stood out to me, how great he was doing. DeAndre Joels got in there quite a bit. Obviously, he's a guy. He's going to be a senior this year. You're looking overall, that defensive line group looked really good. Then you also heard from Pat Narduzzi when it comes to a freshman, Izzy Polk and Braylon Lovelace are two freshmen that looked really good this spring in terms of, Izzy Polk, wide receiver, incoming freshman, early enrollee on the offense, and then Braylon Lovelace, a linebacker from Leechburg here in the Pittsburgh area, small school. People had talked about, was that a risk? Was that potentially something that could come back to haunt Pitt because it looked like a reach? Well, if you learned here today, he's going to get a lot of playing time this year. He's a guy that's going to be able to step up. I look at that linebacker room. Shane Simon, Brandon George, Bengali Kamara, Solomon DeShields. You'll have even Kyle Lewis step up a little bit whenever he gets healthy. But then you have Braylon Lovelace, and then you'll have some of the incoming guys, and certainly Jordan Bass. So you look at that room overall and how well they played yesterday, how physical they were. And it was pretty cool to see Brandon George not just play in the middle of that defense, but obviously too at the Mike position, but also too you saw him at the star position just a little bit as well, just to move around and get some matchups and whatnot. He probably won't play star at all during the season, but it was good to see him playing multiple positions. And of course, you look at the defensive backs. Obviously, you saw, especially on the first team defense, you had obviously Donovan McMillan, the Florida Gators transfer, obviously from Peters Township as well. And then you saw, you obviously saw PJ O'Brien out there. You had Stephen Hall out there. Javon McIntyre obviously was out there with Donovan McMillan as the two starters at safety. We'll see how far that continues to go. But I think the defensive back position in terms of safety, PJ O'Brien had a pick six during the game. I think he did a tremendous job all week. He talked about, obviously living with Eric Hallett and just really describing the defense and really learning how to be able to, one, line up the defense. You're kind of like the quarterback out there in terms of line up the linebackers and then eventually the defensive line as well. So I think eventually, you look at that safeties room, there's a lot of depth back there. You got a number of guys who could potentially play, but you'll see plenty of rotation from this past year. Also, too, obviously, cornerback, you'll have MJ Devonshire, who again looked good yesterday. You'll have AJ Woods. AJ Woods will be there. And then obviously, too, you'll have Marquez Williams. And then Rylan Gandy will step in. Crumpley will be able to step in. And you'll have a number of guys that are there. So you look at the depth overall on defense. It looks really good from the outside looking in, and potentially for this season, when people talked about, where would the depth be? You had so many guys go to the National Football League. What does that mean in terms of what this team will look like? I think overall, when you look at the defense and just how good they looked yesterday, it's going to be what the usual Pat Narduzzi defense is: physical, fast, and you'll have really in this first couple weeks, you may have a couple slip ups because some guys are learning, especially on the back end, especially in a quarters defense. You'll be able to really figure out who the players are in the first 2 weeks because of how fast they're able to adjust and learn. That'll be the biggest thing. Now, when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, a little bit more questions. I think, the quarterback room obviously is set in stone. I think, when you look at it and you talk, you listen to Frank Signetti, he talked about how Phil Dracovic, obviously, when he played at Notre Dame, went to Boston College, now here at Pitt, he had a tremendous 15 days, okay? I think that just how the offense looked yesterday, it was a really, really simplistic vanilla offense. Nothing was really shown. They did a couple reverses, a flea flicker, stuff like that. But you looked at it overall, I thought, Phil Dracovic threw the ball pretty well, especially on a couple deep balls. The one deep ball, I mean, Phil had a guy in his face and got hit at the same time and was still able to throw it 50 yards downfield. That's something you'd love to see. He's not afraid to throw it downfield. When you start seeing the season, you'll see more plays pushing the ball down the field, which was what really lacking with Pitt's offense last year. So that'll be really good. It's Phil Dracovic's third year in the system. That's great to know. And obviously, Christian Vayar, that's a guy that he's coming in here for his first year. Played very well yesterday. He's a guy that he's been really learning this spring, learning this offense. It's been a progression at this point because it is a tedious offense. It can be difficult at times, especially when it's your first year in the system. But I can tell you this: when you look at this team overall, especially on offense, the quarterback room is, I think, the best position in terms of just future success for this Pitt team. And obviously, you had Ty Diffenbach. He looked really good when he came in. Obviously, just had one turnover, and that's typical for a freshman. And obviously, too, Nate Yarnell. I think Nate Yarnell, if you heard in the Pat Narduzzi press conference, he talked about how really Nate's just a guy. He's a veteran guy they look at him as. And his leadership, especially not just on the field but off of it, is very crucial and key. Just tells you how much confidence they have in him. So really, overall, you got 3 or 4 quarterbacks you look at and say, wow, we have ourselves a lot of depth in this room. Now, when it comes to running back, of course, you'll always have Rodney Hammond as your number one. But it was really good to see how well Derek Davis did, the LSU transfer, obviously an alum of Gateway here in Pittsburgh. It was really good to see a guy like that step up and have a tremendous game yesterday. I thought he was really physical. He was being able to really he was really embracing contact. You love to see that. He's a 6 foot over 200 pounds for a running back, which is really good. But then that mixes well with a Sebo Flemister. Sebo really turned it on, and towards the end of last year, you saw it again yesterday. I think that was really good. That'll be your top 3 guys. And then Harvison, early enrollee from the Atlanta area, Georgia area. I think that's really good for him. He did even a really good job yesterday in the number of carries that he got. So I think quarterback and running back are really the two positions at this point that are the really the focal point of we know what to expect. That room is pretty much settled. There's really no competition in that room in terms of who's going to be the starter or the bell cow. Just at this point, Rodney Hammond's going to be that guy when he comes up. When we enter the game in week 1, week 2, he's going to be the guy that starts right away. I think Derek Davis and Sebo Flemister may be working on those 1 and 2s in terms of how long, how many reps they get into a game. But we'll see. I think overall, when you look behind Rodney, Derek Davis, I think he's just a really physical back. It's really good to have him back. I think he's going to be an absolute star in this offense in terms of just a ground and pound. The days of just having that one guy out there for 50, 60 snaps, those days are gone. You want to be able to have that 1-2 punch. And I think just that Rodney Hammond and Derek Davis are going to look really good as a good 1-2 punch. Now, when it comes to the wide receiver position and the tight end position, I really put it in that term. The wide receiver position for me is a very thin position at this point. You look at on Saturday, Konate Mumfield was out due to being hurt. I think, something, potentially with an injury with his pinky or something like that, just out of precaution to keep him out. But 2, obviously, Day Reynolds, he was out yesterday as well. So potentially you're really your number 1 receiver and your number 3 receiver weren't playing yesterday. I thought Bub Means looked a lot better yesterday. He's basically picking up where he left off from the bowl game in terms of getting better. And the development under Tyquan Underwood has been crucial. And I think when you see those guys and you see Bub Means making those plays, obviously he had that. It was a really close play in terms of if he just maybe jumps a little bit in terms of getting that ball downfield, that one that Djokovic threw, that'd be great. Especially just using his big frame, man. He's a big wide receiver. He's chiseled. That's the kind of wide receiver Tyquan Underwood really wants. And I can tell you this, the progress that guy's made from last spring to this spring is night and day. So that was really good to see a guy that's really creating space, something that really wasn't happening last year. You love to see the guy creating space, going up to get balls. I think that's really good. But 2 wide receivers, and I talked about them previously, 2 wide receivers that are early enrollees. I think they're going to have major roles in terms of this offense. Obviously, the first one being Izzy Polk out of the national champion high school in California, number one high school in California. That was really good to see him step up. He's had a tremendous spring camp, but also, too, Lamar Seymour. I think Lamar Seymour will have a say in terms of what he's going to look like. He's going to have fall camp to get better. I think his alignments need to be a little bit better, just getting lined up. That's a thing that I think needs to get better. And again, that just gets back to Cignetti's offense being very tedious. It can be complex at times, but it's important that those guys need to get lined up correctly. That's the biggest thing. So I think Lamar, the more and more he gets in this offense, which is especially in the fall, but as you go through summertime, you'll be able to go over that more with Djokovic. He talked about throwing with wide receivers, getting alignments correct. That'll be crucial. And I think the more Lamar plays, the more he'll be understanding in terms of alignment. And alignment is so key, and that's something he really needs to work on. But overall, when you really look at this room, you've got really, in terms of recruiting, their top 3 wide receivers, Konate Mumfield, Bub Means, and Dejon Reynolds. Those are 3 transfers. Those are 3 guys that weren't recruited as freshmen to come into Pitt. That's a little concerning to me in terms of what that room's going to look like. We'll see what it continues to look like. But those guys have a lot to prove. That's how I look at it. Those are guys, especially last year, Konate, he had good spurts at times, but he never really broke out. Bub Means had good and flashing moments, but there were times where he was running wrong routes, had wrong alignments. I think he needs to continue to improve. This spring, he has shown that. If he steps up during the summer and in the fall, that would be really crucial. So if those guys continue to develop the way they are right now, I'll have less concerns in the fall. But then, Dejon Reynolds, he looked in a short period of time. He was obviously at Florida. He had a number of good plays out there, but he didn't get a lot of playing time. So that's a guy that has to prove himself as well. And there's been times, especially during the spring camp, where I've heard where, he's been injured, quite often. You don't want to see that. You want that guy out there as much as possible during practices and making sure he's practicing. Those 3 guys, they have a lot to prove. And then after that, it's really a drop off. You have two incoming freshmen, early enrollees. I think in terms of college football in the ACC, you really don't want to rely on two freshmen coming in to be that that backhorse where you have three guys right now, and then you have two freshmen that you really have to rely on. I think Zion Fowler, when he comes in, there's potential he plays this year because of how good he is. Another big wide receiver, very explosive. If you've seen on Twitter, obviously he's a big guy. He's a guy that can dunk, very athletic, speed. Obviously got to catch routes with Kenny Pickett when Kenny was back in New Jersey, visiting family and stuff like that. That was good to see. But really, in reality, I expect Pitt here in the next 6 weeks to come back with another wide receiver. I really do. I think they need one desperately. They really need those four guys. I think that if they play college football, I think that's really crucial. I think one of the things right now is they're working to try to get Jaquay from the Cal U program, Division II. His recruiting has really blown up. From what I've heard, Pitt's done everything they possibly can. I can tell you that. In terms of recruiting, they've done a hell of a job in really getting that guy to understand that they really want him. And especially when you're coming from Cal PA, Cal U, there's a big difference in terms of what talent's going to look like him playing against the Division I program. But, it's very clear Pitt wants him to join that team. I can tell you, right now, just from things that I've heard, the kind of way he's leaning right now would be Rutgers, because it just in terms of playing time, and obviously there's some NIL money that's really involved in that. It is what it is. We're in the world that we are in right now with NIL, is just it's never going to change now. Pandora's box has been open. If guys want to choose, if they want to choose to go the NIL route because it's their last year and they're not sure they're going to go to the NFL, hey, by all means, take the money. But in terms of what you're going to get with a guy throwing to you, again, I think he's leaning towards Rutgers from what I heard. Obviously, Miami's trying to get involved a little bit. I don't know if you want to get involved in that, but I can tell you Pitt would be a really good option for him, and I think it would be his best option. But then again, guys got to make their own decisions, and we'll see what he does. But in terms of that room right now, I think they got to go out and get a guy. They have 3 roster spots, scholarships open right now. I think potentially from what I've heard, there's going to be some more scholarships that open up and potential that you'll see some guys transfer out. Just guys that aren't getting a lot of playing time right now, and they're looking for another opportunity somewhere else, which is always good. I think what Pitt has done in terms of that and allowing these guys to go see different areas and potential other opportunities. Narduzzi has been incredible with that, with guys just want another opportunity somewhere else. They're not getting it here. They're not even making it too deep. Pitt's done a good job by finding those guys opportunities to go somewhere else. So I would expect really 1 or 2 more guys to really hit the portal. From what I've heard, those names will be released eventually when they come out if they make those decisions. But I think overall, the wide receiver room needs at least 1 more wide receiver transfer. I think that is so crucial. Just so you're not relying on your true freshman wide receivers to step up. You get 1 more guy in here at least. You'll have 4 wide receivers, and then you can really work with your two true freshmen. And I think there's potential for them to be very good. We'll see what that looks like in the summer and through the fall. But that would be nice where you have 4 guys who have played college football before, and now you get 2 freshmen coming in. It'll be your 6 wide receivers. In terms of the tight end room, again, that's another one, man. You look at that room, for years in this era with under Narduzzi, man. It's just been, Lucas Krull. You had Scott Orndorff, who was an absolute stud. I think he was really, underrated for how well he played. I think Scott was tremendous, obviously out of Seton LaSalle. He was a tremendous asset under Pitt. Obviously, he had a number of great catches. You had a number of them, especially in the Clemson game in 2016 when Pitt beat Clemson down in Death Valley. That was great. Since then, you really had, Lucas Krull come in, and then you had Gavin Bartholomew. I mean, that's really about it in terms of what the tight end rooms look like. And I think it's great to see Carter Johnson step up in terms of blocking, but being a receiving threat. You've seen a number of the videos from the Pitt main website and their Twitter account. Just a little bit of the clips that what he's done in terms of receiving. That's going to be crucial. I expect Pitt to go out and really and go out and get another tight end. I know they're looking right now. I think they're going to land one eventually here, just one that really fits them. in terms of just being in the passing game, someone to be a potential threat downfield. They're searching right now. And I think in the spring game, you saw obviously Gavin was out. Carter Johnson played a little bit. He looked good. He caught a number of balls. Jake Renda was out there. I think Jake's another guy that needs to continue to learn the offense. There's a lot of questions around that. I think he's a great athlete. I think he can be a great player, but he's another guy that he has to learn his alignments. He's got to get lined up. How many procedure calls, especially from the spring game, did we see? It's really important. Javante Royal was another guy, had a number of different procedure penalties just being lined up wrong, and just overall in that room, I think just in the tight end room in general, they need another guy down there. I think they really do. Obviously in terms of this tight end room, you want to get more depth as possible. If you can get a guy in the portal that has multiple years left, that would be great. But in terms of just the depth in tight end, they need another guy. And I think that was really smart, by holding Gavin Bartholomew out, which was a really good thing. I think, there's nothing for him to play for in a spring game. Like Carter Johnson play, let him get the reps, and then let some of these other guys get reps. That's the most important thing. So it was really good to see those guys get reps in this game. In terms of offensive line, you're going to see some shuffling going on in there. I think your Stonewall guys that are automatically in there. I think from right to left, your right tackle will be Matt Gonsalves. At right guard will be Blake Zubovic. At center, obviously, will be Jake Cradle. I think he'll be the best Pitt center we've had here in a number of years, just from how, in terms of just his physicality, run blocking, pass blocking, and just his knowledge of the offense. That guy's an absolute stud in the middle. He's going to be one of our better centers that we've had here in a long time. At left guard, you had Ryan Jacoby there during the spring game. I'm excited to see if there's a battle potentially there with Ryan Bayer potentially playing in the right, potentially left guard. Or do they just keep him outside left tackle to where he competes with Branson Taylor, who Branson Taylor was the starter in the spring game this past weekend. I think that there'll be a competition there continuously. But right now, I think when you look at it, you really have 3 tackles at this point, and then you have 3 guards at this point that are rotating in and out that you saw. And there's potentially, if you have a couple other guys that really want to rotate in there, we'll see. But I think that you really got 3 tackles at this point and 3 guards at this point that you look at and say, okay, hey, these guys, they know for a fact they can trust, they can play on Saturdays. We'll see where that goes. Potentially, if they find the right person, I think Narduzzi mentioned that in his press conference, talking about we're not looking just to add a guy, we're looking for the right guy. Okay, and I think if they find the right guy, if he's out there and potentially to add more depth to this offensive line, they're going to do it. I think there's plenty of potential that they can do that. So that's another potentially offensive lineman, I think, and more interior. I think their tackles overall, you have Ryan Coretta coming in. I've heard B.J. Williams, the early enrollee. He's going to be very, very good here. He was potentially, whenever he was committed to Memphis, they pulled the commitment from Memphis to get him to commit to Pitt. Apparently, he's had a tremendous spring, in terms of offensive linemen. So you'll love that. And then obviously Ryan Coretta coming in. I think he's the jewel and the prize of this recruiting class on the offensive line when he gets here in the summertime. That'll be really good. So I think overall, you're looking at this offensive line group. I think for sure you'll have B.J. Williams and Ryan Coretta really step up, and we'll see what they look like. It's really hard for a freshman to potentially play on Saturdays as a true freshman. It's just very hard. It's very hard to find those guys. So in reality, I look at this. There's a lot to like. The real question marks that I have at this point are at the wide receiver position and at tight end. Offensive line, I think it's straight there. I think maybe at left guard, there's still a competition going on right now, and potentially right guard if they really want to push it. But overall, when you look at this team and how it looked yesterday, you saw a lot of speed, a lot of physicality. I think, in a spring game, you really don't judge it. I saw people say, Phil wasn't throwing the ball downfield, and how Christian wasn't throwing the ball downfield that many times. Guys, it's a spring game. They're not doing anything special. They're not going to show anything on on their ACC network. That's how it is under Narduzzi. There's going to be nothing explosive. It's just to make sure you play a game, you show the fans who's all out there, but more importantly, keeping everybody healthy. You heard that, Pat Narduzzi talk about that numerous times during the game, before the game, during the game, and after the game. Keeping guys healthy because you want to make sure they're ready to go. So the way I look at it is, guys, I thought it was great to see how that defensive line played, the physicality up front, how they were able to move people, create pressure. The DBs played extremely well. Braylon Lovelace pretty much solidified himself as a guy who's going to be a true freshman that plays in the fall. That was really good. The running back room again, Rodney Hammond, Derek Davis again. Derek Davis, that was a tremendous pickup. He'll be a great back for Pitt in terms of depth and what he does this season. He showed it again on Saturday. And then also too, just the quarterback room. You got to love what Phil and Christian did. I think you're in really good shape. Nate Yarnell really commanded the offense as well. His leadership and his confidence. You really got three. You're not going to let the freshman Ty Diffenbach really put himself out there. Let him learn and develop. That's why he came here. Signetti will do that, especially with Jonathan DiBiase, the quarterback coach. They'll take care of him. But really, you look at it, Pitt's got three really good quarterbacks in terms of Phil Dracovic, Christian Valar, and you'll have Nate Yarnell. I think overall the quarterback room for the future just looks good, especially for right now in the future. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If Phil Dracovic can play the way he did in 2020 when he threw for almost 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions in a shortened season, 10 games, guys, the quarterback position really tells you a lot. And I think he's done a tremendous job. I think, there's stuff that you guys haven't seen in camp. The stuff I've heard that how well he's been playing, his completion percentage over 70%. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you want to see. It's the kind of stuff you want to hear. Overall, this team has got a lot of talent. It's got a couple holes in it for sure, in 2 different positions. But I'll tell you what, do not be shocked if you're going to see here in the next 6 weeks that Pitt adds guys in those positions to really solidify those spaces. And of course, I'll be doing shows on those when they do, because this team has a lot of talent. And at this point right now, the floor for Pitt this year, I have right now, and I've said it before, is 9-3. That's how much talent this team has. That's how much veteranship this team has. And the young guys who will step up, especially on the outsides, on the defensive line, are going to play well. Nikai Johnson is ready for a big year. Dayon Hayes is ready for another big year. Samuel Okinola, big year. You'll see, Jimmy Scott. Jimmy Scott will have a big year this year. You're just going to see a bunch of guys step up. What Braylon Lovelace does. When Jordan Bass gets here in the fall, what's he going to do? Overall, I'm very happy with where this team is compared to where it was last spring. Last spring, they were learning so much different concepts because the offense was new. You got to be extremely happy where this team is because they already have so much more already in there. Last year, this team was not where it needed to be. It was just still learning a complex system under Frank Signetti. This year, you're going to see that next step because I think Dracovic is that good, and he's so comfortable in this system, and he's already back already, and he played so well in the spring. You're going to see it in the fall. And that guy, and especially even too, when you talk to his high school coach, whenever he was talking to Frank Signetti, Eric Kasparovich, he even said he's a different guy on game days, and you haven't seen it yet. When he's there, it's a very different game. If you want to go back, watch some of the previous games last year at Boston College. When he's out there, man, it's a different world, man. He's pushing those offensive linemen. He's pushing those wide receivers, running backs, and he gets vocal. That's how he is. And I think everybody on this team has talked about how his leadership style is basically, get shit done. That's how it works. So it's going to be exciting to see this team. I'm very happy where this team is right now. I think that the progression from the quarterback room, the offensive line, the running backs, what they've done, I think this is a very good telltale where this team is. I think overall they're good. They have their holes, but they're going to be filled here in the next 6 weeks. I can tell you that. The amount of talent this team has built over the years has been incredible. And I think that has a lot to say about Pat Narduzzi, has a lot to say about Frank Signetti, Charlie Partridge, Tyquan Underwood, Andre Powell, Dave Borbley, Ryan Manilak, Archie Collins, Corey Sanders. Just these guys have been working their tails off. Tim Salem, I think that you look at it overall, there's a couple holes here, and you want to get better recruiting in terms of wide receiver and tight end. I think Tyquan has done that from this past class. The 4 freshmen that are coming in, they're going to be very good. But you just allow that stuff to build over time, plus a transfer portal, you'll see that continually get better. And then when you look at this team overall, just the concept and the knowledge when you're seeing these guys play at a lot faster pace. The younger guys are obviously still having issues getting lined up and whatnot, but that takes time to develop because they're young guys. But the guys who were here last year on offense know what they're doing this year, and you love to see it. I was extremely happy with what I saw, especially in terms of the run game too. I just think that with the guys that missed, your two top wide receivers in terms of your top three, Kenate Mumfield not playing and Day Reynolds not playing. Dude, Bub Means looked really good when you threw the ball downfield. He was creating space, getting open. Lamar Seymour had his moments, especially when he was making plays. Izzy Polk, another guy that was making plays. Walk on Jake McConkey. That's another guy who played his lights out. I mean, he caught a really nice ball over the middle. Don't be shocked if you see him a little bit this year. He earns a scholarship. So you look overall, they're getting better and better. You want to see some of those holes filled, but overall, from this spring to the last spring, it's clearly better. It's clearly better, and you're going to see them push the ball down the field. And they were kind of hiding that in the spring game. And again, that's why I tell people, at the end of the day, the spring game, in terms of what the team totally looks like, it's not that important, but it's nice when you get to see those guys out there and make those individual plays. What do they look like? Maybe not throwing the ball down the field, but are they creating space in those short routes? Are the running backs running hard? What does it look like after contact? What's the form look like, especially up front on the defensive line? Are they physical with their hands? Is the offensive line moving guys in terms of especially when they're running the football? How's their pass blocking look? Those are things you can judge. The play calling, you can't. If they're not throwing the ball down the field, you can't because they're still hiding. They're still hiding stuff. They're not going to open up the playbook too much because they want to keep guys safe. Guys, overall, I can tell you this right now, it's unreal. I am very happy where this team is at this point. Expect some more news here in the coming 6 weeks, and we'll be able to talk about that. As always, please subscribe to the channel. Again, it's so big that you guys do subscribe to it. We've been growing at a rapid rate. That's great. The channel is nothing without you guys. It was great to talk to all of you at the spring game, especially the ones that came up to me. It was great. It's so cool to meet everybody who really comments on the channel and who really watches it. It's so cool. Always love the dialogue in the comments section. So please subscribe, like, and comment on the video. Tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. What did you think of the spring game? Was it important or not important to you? Let me hear your thoughts. So again, thank you guys so much. The spring game, like I said, I really don't put too much value into it, but I saw plenty of good in the spring game from individual play. But more importantly, this team is ready for success this year, and we'll see the number of players they add through the portal. So as always, guys, thank you guys so much. As always, Hail to Pitt. I'll see you next time.